Hey everybody, in this video I want to show you my budget commander Rakdos deck. Everything in this deck right now costs just under $70. This deck is super fun because we play the commander Rakdos Lord of Riots. This deck focuses on dishing cheap damage to our opponents in order to summon very large creatures, but also keeping the Rakdos theme and causing anarchy and mayhem throughout the whole board. Everybody in this game is going to lose life no matter what we're doing. Our opponent's also going to have to make some pretty interesting choices with some certain cards. Also, your friends are probably going to hate you because of cards like this, where every single upkeep, everyone loses half their life. Just kind of anarchy, especially if people have some life gain decks or something like that. It doesn't matter how much life you have, you're losing half of it. This deck just has some really fun interactions and cards, and your opponents are probably just going to be like, why are you playing that card? But it's a lot of fun. This deck is also super upgradable. On Christmas, I pulled this out of a Modern Masters box. This thing's like, I don't know, like 50 to 70 bucks. I could just throw this in this deck and no ifs, ands, or buts, because look how this card works. I can summon this almost for free if I somehow do 11 damage to all my opponents. A lot of fun. Let's get into the deck tech. Let's first discuss the commander a little bit more in depth. So Rakdos, Lord of Riots, 2 black and 2 red. It's a 6/6 and you can't cast it unless your opponent lost life this turn. This deck can do damage to your opponent in many different ways, so that's very doable. This also has flying and trample. The main thing about this card is creature spells you cast cost 1 generic less to cast for each 1 life your opponents have lost this turn. So Ulamog's Crusher is a card that's actually in this deck. This card's like super cheap. If we somehow deal 8 damage to our opponents, this card we can play for free because it technically costs 0 to cast. That is why this deck is so spicy. And it's not like we're using 8 mana. No. This costs 8 less to cast. So we're not using any mana, we just get to play it for free. This commander also costs only 4 to cast for a 6/6 flying trample. You're always hitting for that, so this is very doable to get out pretty early in the game. So I'm going to start this actually in kind of reverse order. Usually you go like to the low mana cards and you like go up and whatever, but I want to show you like what we're actually going for, what we want to summon, because that's the pretty hype stuff. So obviously Ulamog's Crusher, we just talked about it. It's an 8/8 for 8, it has Annihilator 2. Whenever this creature attacks, defending player sacrifices 2 permanents. And you're getting this out not for 8, it's always like much less, because again, if you usually have this on the field. So this is almost a free card. This card is also a pretty well played commander, so this deck could be around for a pretty long time, just because that ability is so good. Next up we have Pestilence Demon. It's a 5 generic and 3 black for a 7/6 with flying. However, it has the ability for 1 black. It deals 1 damage to each creature and each player. Usually this card's getting into the board a lot later in the game because of the high mana cost, but again, that 5 generic, this could go completely away because of Rakdos' ability. So it really would only cost 3 for a huge creature with the ability to ping everything and everyone. And you could activate it multiple times. Magmatic Force has 5 generic and 3 red with the ability at the beginning of each upkeep, it deals 3 damage to any target. It's basically a lightning bolt on everyone's upkeep. How insane is that? And it's a 7/7. Huge monster, and every turn you get to deal 3 damage. And again, usually we're not casting this for its whole mana cost, we're casting it for much less. I just want to show you what this deck can summon and is capable of. Next up we got this dude, the Maw of Flames, 4 generic and 3 red. It's also 7/7 with flying. Beautiful artwork, but also whenever this card attacks, it deals 4 damage to any target and 3 damage to each of up to 2 other targets. This thing is just destroying everything every single time it attacks, and it's a 7/7 with flying. So every time again this card attacks and you have Riots out on the field, it just like snowballs, right? Because every turn you're getting such a massive amounts of like generic mana per se, or proccing that ability of it costs 1 less to cast. And that's not even including the damage that's going to be done if this thing hits your opponent, because this is just when it attacks. Absolutely awesome. Next up, Inferno Titan, kind of similar to Maw of Flames except a little bit less. It's a 6 mana 6/6, and you can pay 1 red and it gets +1 to the end of turn. However, whenever it enters the battlefield or attacks, deals 3 damage divided as you choose among 1, 2, or 3 targets and or players. So just some other ways to ping other creatures or just deal damage to your opponents to kind of either get more mana or just ping someone in the face so you can summon Rakdos. Next up we have Karvik the Merciless. This is a 7 mana 5/4. Not that good looking, but check out this ability. Whenever an opponent plays a spell, this deals damage to target creature or player equal to that spell's converted mana cost. So every time someone plays something, they get injured. They literally deal damage to themselves. That's what I'm talking about, like Rakdos also. It just makes your opponent say, do I really want to spend mana on this card? And it's not you, it's only your opponent, remember. Even if your opponent plays a 5 mana card, that's 5 damage getting dealt to them. Or you can obviously choose a creature, but typically, I mean, yeah, it depends on the board state, but either way, you're dealing 5 damage to something that they have. Next up is Geode Golem. This card is kind of just more of a little bit more supportive, but it's 5 generic, so you can almost play it for free if you somehow deal 5 damage. It's a 5/3 with trample, but whenever it deals combat damage to a player, you may cast the commander from your command zone without paying his mana cost. This is super helpful later in the game if the commander starts getting pretty high up and your opponent keeps destroying it. Get it out for free. It's there when you need it. Next up, one of my favorite Rakdos cards ever, Sire of Insanity. 6 mana, 6/4. At the beginning of each end step, each player discards his or her hand. We're really, throwing the Rakdos vibes into this card. Nobody gets to have fun. Everyone gets to discard their hand. This usually gets targeted by some type of removal, and if not, everyone hates you. It's super fun. Beautiful artwork too. Love that monster. Next up, we get Death Bridge Throcar. I don't know how to pronounce that, but it's a 6 mana 3/3, pretty weak. However, whenever another creature dies, you may put a +1 counter on this card. We have a sacrifice engine in this deck, so we're constantly sacrificing stuff. We're also dealing a lot of damage to our opponents, who usually also will have creatures, so we're to be destroying creatures. It's whenever another creature dies, not just on your side of the battlefield. Best part, remove a 1/1 counter from this card. It deals 1 damage to target player or creature. So we can ping something if we need to get Rakdos or Lord of Riots out. Just a great card to have around, but also great because we have, again, the sacrifice engine, which we will be going into. This kind of rounds out the super big monsters. You can play a lot more. There's so many other cards you can play too. Like literally any card with like a high converted mana cost that has a lot of generic, you can be like, okay, I want to throw this in the deck, and you can easily do that. For my deck, again, I'm going to be running Ulamog, but I'm also Wormcoil Engine is my favorite card, so I would be throwing that in there. Just we'll talk about it later for upgrades, but if you have those cards lying around, you see some big artifact or Eldrazi creature, just throw it in the deck. Next up, I want to talk about the Sacrifice Engine because it's pretty important in the deck. We have Gutter Bones here. This card's like $1, but it's a 1 mana 2/1. Best part though, you can return it from your graveyard to your hand if you activate 2 or 1 generic and 1 black. However, your opponent has to have lost life this turn. Pretty easy to proc that, and definitely doable, but we need to have at least some kind of card to keep reoccurring from our sacrificing engine. We have Jury Master Revu. Rakdos colors is a 1/1. Whenever you sacrifice a permanent, put a +1/+1 counter on this card. When this dies, it deals damage equal to its power to any target. We do have some ways of sacrificing in the deck, and when this finally does die, we get to put our power again anywhere, which again can proc Rakdos or Lord of Riots, or just again bring down the cost of all of our creatures that we're going to cast that turn. We have Fireblade Artist, 2 mana 2/2. At the beginning of your upkeep, you may sacrifice a creature. When you do, it deals 2 damage to target opponent or planeswalker. It's great because turn 2 you can be swinging in with a 2/2, but again, more importantly, you want that at the beginning of your upkeep. You may sacrifice a creature. Next up, we got Playcraft. This is just a fun card because it's a 3 mana 3/2, but it's just you put a creature on the board and everyone sacrifices something, and if they can't, they discard a card. But typically, you're gonna want to play it when your opponent's got some big creature out and they just summon. You're like, I'm just gonna, I'm gonna play this card. Everyone's gonna sacrifice something and see what happens. This might hurt us later in the game if we don't have other creatures that we want to sacrifice, but we can always sacrifice this creature in response to it. So just one of those cards. We have Judith, 3 mana 2/2. However, other creatures get +1. Best part though, whenever a non-creature token you control dies, it deals 1 damage to any target. You can hit anything on the board, planeswalkers, creatures, mostly for our opponent if we want to, again, proc this. So many ways, again, we have infinite ways of procking this card in our deck, so definitely I wouldn't be concerned about not casting that. Got Lizolda, the Blood Witch. It's a 3 mana 3/1, sacrifice 2 mana, sacrifice a creature. This deals 2 damage to target creature or player. If the sacrificed creature was red, draw a card. If the sacrificed creature was black. Now, if it's Rakdos colors, which is basically every card, not every card, actually, that's a lie, but there's a lot of creatures in the deck that are both colors. So you're going to get both effects. Incredible value. Absolutely incredible. So that kind of wraps up the sacrificing engine. There's not like a lot of cards there, but you can always add a little bit more, but also you don't want to be too reliant on the sacrifice engine. Not too reliant, but you got to have other stuff going on in the deck. It's there when you have it, and it's great when it comes up. However, every card in the deck can't be sacrificing outlet. Next up, we'll go into some supporting creatures. These are going to either help destroy some cards our opponents have, or they're going to help, again, ping for damage, or just help us get some draw, or allow us to go over the top in some sense. Just again, some more supporting aspects. First one is Forsworn Paladin, 1 mana, 1/1's got menace, so it has to be blocked by 2 or more creatures. However, if you pay 2 mana and tap it, you pay 1 life, you create a treasure token just to help accelerate that mana a little bit further if you need it. And you could pay 2 in a black, target creature gets +2 near the turn. If mana from a treasure was spent to activate this ability, that creature also gains death touch to the end of turn. I mean, not like amazing, but it's again something to help get some treasure tokens on the board, or if you're in a weird board state and you need to get like a creature with death touch, just something to have. Next up, Grim Lavamancer, 1 mana, 1/1, pay 1 red, tap it, exile 2 cards from graveyard. It deals 2 damage to target creature or player. Just good because also people play in the graveyard too. You want to make sure you're having some interactions with your opponent, especially if they're doing shenanigans in the graveyard. Instant speed too for 1 mana, and if they have 2 cards in the graveyard, you're dealing 2 damage to something, so definitely comes up. Next up, we got Guild Mage. There's a 2 mana 2/2, target player discards a card, activates the ability one time you can cast a sorcery. So for a lot of mana, you can kind of make someone discard. However, you can also for 1 red and tap this, it deals 1 damage to target opponent or planeswalker. Just another way to help proc this card to get on the field. Pretty easy, pretty cheap. You can do it the next turn anyway, or the turn after you summon. Thermo Alchemist, we got Raymond Smallman art, one of my favorites. 2 mana, 0/3 defender. However, if you tap this, deals 1 damage to each opponent. Keyword each, because if there are multiple, again, you deal damage to everybody. Whenever you tap an instant or sorcery spell, untap this card. So you can actually tap this multiple times if you're playing a lot of instants and sorceries. This deck's not, because we're mostly focusing on the creatures to do most of our damage. However, that does come up, obviously. Next, we have Rix, the Reveler. It's a 2 mana 2/2. Whenever it enters the battlefield, discard a card, then draw a card. But if you paid it Spectacle, so 2, a black and a red, you can discard your entire hand and draw 3 cards. Kind of good early game to maybe get some card out of the hand you don't need to get one you might want, but also is best for later in the game when you have no hand or you have like 1 card in your hand. You can just pay its Spectacle and you draw 3 cards, so it comes up. It's good. Next up, we have Stormfist Crusader, 2 mana 2/2 with menace. At the beginning of your upkeep, each player draws a card and loses a life. This is good because, again, you're drawing cards and your opponents are losing life, so it's proccing everything. However, also your opponents are drawing a card, so that's in a sense bad, but I think the benefits outweigh the negatives here because everybody's losing life even though they're drawing a card, and you just gain so much more value, I think, in my opinion, from that. But yeah, really good card. You're going to need the extra draw in this deck too. So we have Odds Maker, 3 mana 3/3. At the beginning of your combat, on your turn, you may discard a card. If you do, choose a creature. Whatever that creature deals combat damage to that player this turn, you draw 2 cards. Just some more ways to draw cards from your deck, but it's also either kind of forcing some interaction from your opponent because they don't really want you to draw 2 cards. Also, this card comes out pretty early in the game. If it comes out later, it's good every single stage in the game. So Keen Duelist is a little bit more expensive, however the card is just so good. 2 mana 2/2, but the main thing here is the ability, or the effect per se. At the beginning of your upkeep, you and target opponent each reveal the top card of your library. You each lose life equal to the mana value of the card revealed by the other player. You each put this card you revealed into your hand. So you and your opponent are drawing a card. However, if you flip over, again, let's say, we'll just have Ulamog here really quick, or the other card, they're getting dealt 11 damage because you revealed this card. Now, it's highly unlikely you reveal this. Most likely you're revealing something smaller, but if it does come up and hit your opponent, that's massive. Either way, your opponent is typically going to lose some sort of life, again, unless you hit like a land. But that's going to proc and help out all your synergies and stuff to cast some better creatures. But yeah, if you hit something big and spicy, oof, your opponents get mad. And we have the Doom Scourger, 4 mana, 4/3. Whenever it enters the battlefield until your next turn, creatures your opponent control attack each combat if able, and attack a player other than you if able. Kind of just spicy again, causing some anarchy. Whenever an attacking creature dies, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. Just some more synergy. If things get sacrificed, our opponents lose even more life, and it just got some life gain in there too, just in case. Hellrider, kind of a throwback card for me, 4 mana, 3/3 haste. Whenever a creature you control attacks, deals 1 damage to defending player. So whoever you attack, if you attack with like 5 creatures, you're dealing 5 damage immediately to that player's face. So that's super fun. This card also does trigger that 1 damage. So if it only attack with this card, you're dealing 1 damage to your opponent anyway. Got Spawn of Mayhem. I think this card's like $2, not super expensive, but it's super good. 4 mana, 4/4. You can pay for its Spectacle if your opponent lost life this turn, so it technically is a 3 mana because our opponents are always going to lose life. It's got Flying Trample at the beginning of your upkeep. This deals 1 damage to each player. Then if you have 10 or less life, put +1 counter on Spawn of Mayhem. Main thing here is Really cheap, big boy flying trample, and at every upkeep, it deals 1 damage to each player. Next up, Tectonic Giant. It's a 4 mana 3/4. Whenever it attacks, becomes a target spell or an ability an opponent controls. You deal 3 damage to each opponent, or you exile the top card of your library, choose one of them until the end of your turn, you may play that card. So it kind of helps you maybe get a card that you might need, but most of the time you might be wanting to deal 3 damage to everybody and, you know, make everyone feel the punishment. So if one opponent targets this card, everybody's going to pay the price by getting Lightning Bolt to the face. We got the Chaos Rider. It's a 3 mana 2/3. Whenever an opponent draws their first card each turn, if it's not their turn, you create a 1/1 Red Devil token with whenever this creature dies, deals 1 damage to target. However, the spicy part is whenever one or more devils you control attacks one or more players, you and those players each draw a card and discard a card at random. So if your opponent's got some good cards in their hand, you're making them discard at random. It's kind of just a feels bad moment because, again, it's random. You're rolling a dice and you never know what card you might lose in your hand. Keeps the game live and spicy. Next up, we got the Sad Robot. I usually have this card in every single commander, so it's definitely a worthy pickup if you haven't had it already because it's viable in every single deck because of its mana cost. 4 generic 2/2. Whenever it enters the battlefield, you may search your library for a basic land, put it on the battlefield tapped, and when it dies, you draw a card. Just great value. Typically, you're getting this out for free anyway, so you might as well throw this in the deck. And this also acts as a sacrificing outlet, so if you just have it on the field, you want to draw a card, just sacrifice it using one of your engine cards in here. So next up we got Sin Prodiger, 3 mana 3/2 with Menace. At the beginning of your upkeep, reveal the top card of your library. Any opponent may have that you put that card into your graveyard. If a player does, this deals damage to that player equal to that card's converted mana cost. Otherwise, put that card in your hand. So every upkeep, you're either drawing a card or your opponent is taking damage equal to the card's converted mana cost. So either way, it's no matter what happens here, you win. You're either, again, drawing the card or it's hopefully you have Riots on the field. If you don't, it's going to be able to proc, assuming you don't draw a land, but it should proc, allowing you to either summon him or you're going to be able to deal a pretty good amount of damage to your opponent. Anger, this card's again a little more expensive, maybe like $4. However, you just need it. It's so good, especially if you're playing any type of red deck. It's a 4 mana 2/2. Haste, okay? But as long as Anger's in your graveyard and you control a mountain, creatures you control have haste. So as this just goes to your graveyard somehow. You could discard it using one of our cards, or you can just play it early and hopefully get into the graveyard by sacrificing it. Get it into the graveyard. Everything you have has haste now because you will have a mountain because we play, I think, 10 mountains. Again, a little more expensive card. I think it's so worth it. But yeah, obviously your choice. Massacre Curl is like a board wiping card. It's a 5 mana 4/4 with Menace. Everything's got Menace in this deck too. Kind of just fits again the Rakdos vibe. Whenever this enters the battlefield, each other creature gets -1 until the end of turn. Whenever a creature dies, each creature other than Massacre Girl gets -1 to the end of turn. So again, if you hit something for -1, something dies, it procs again. If everything is -1 again, if something dies, it procs again. Keeps going. So you can board wipe everything, assuming, like, obviously, if you do the math right, like if there's a 1 toughness, 2 toughness, 3 toughness, 4 toughness, 5 toughness on the board, you can wipe out everything. If you time this card right, it is so spicy. Next up, we got Blood Gift Demon, 5 mana 5/4 flying. At the beginning of your upkeep, target player draws a card and loses 1 life. Typically, you're going to want to target yourself, so you draw extra cards during your upkeep. So again, we have a good amount of ways in the deck to draw cards. However, you can also ping your opponent if you want to, just to summon Lord of Riots if you don't already have it out. Just another way to draw cards and ping stuff during your upkeep. Last monster deck, we got this dude. It's a 4 mana 5/1 haste. Typically, though, you're just going to cycle it, though, just to get a mountain or swamp to your hand, because obviously it depends on the board state, but either you have a 5/1 with haste or you're going to get a basic land to your hand. So that kind of rounds out the creatures for now. Let's head on over to the enchantments, spells, and all that other stuff. I want to start with the enchantments because I love these enchantments. This is one of the reasons why I even want to play more and more Rakdos, is because just the absolute anarchy it causes. We saw this earlier with Havoc Festival, but 6 mana players cannot gain life. Cool. At the beginning of each player's upkeep, that player loses half of his or her life rounded up. So if you're at 40, if no one lost life yet, boom, you go to 20. Now, technically, it doesn't proc, or it does proc Lord of Riots, but by the time it gets back to your turn, you're not going to have that effect. However, again, it just causes anarchy. That's what Rakdos is all about. Just making everybody not really have fun while you laugh at them. Next up, we got Theater Horrors, 3 mana. At the beginning of your upkeep, exile the top card of your library. During your turn, if an opponent lost life this turn, which they will, you may play lands and cast spells from among the cards exiled with Theater of Horrors. 4 mana, this will deal 1 damage to target opponent or a planeswalker. So what it's doing is, just, again, at the beginning of your upkeep, you're just flipping a card over, you're exiling it, it's going to exile, but you're going to be able to play it as long as your opponent lost life. What you can see in the deck, they will, so it's just another free draw. And if they didn't lose life, you just pay 3 or 4 and you get it. Captive Audience, if you don't know what this card is, you're missing out, because this is, again, a beautiful card. This card does cost like $3, but if you like your opponent hating you, this is literally the card for you. For 7 mana, this enters the battlefield under the control of an opponent of your choice. At the beginning of your opponent's upkeep, choose one that hasn't been chosen. Your life total becomes 4, discard your hand. Each opponent creates a 5/2/2 black zombie tokens. So your opponent gets to decide how they want to hate themselves. I just think that's amazing. What a card. What an absolutely beautiful card. So this card gives them the choice of how they want to basically lose. Next up, we're going to go over some removal cards. So Lightning Bolt, I think is pretty needed. It's like $1 now, super cheap. I definitely pick up one. If you're ever playing red, you're going to be using a Lightning Bolt anyway. Next up, we got Colt and Ribbons. Colt, deal 4 damage to target creature. Cool, destroy something. However, if this is in the graveyard, each opponent loses X life. Each opponent. So even if you just pick one, it doesn't even matter because everyone's losing 1 life. Next up, we got Bedevil. Instant speed, destroy target artifact, enchantment, or a planeswalker. Just some really good removal. Pretty cheap costing card too, like price-wise. This card's a little expensive. Blasphemous Act. It's going to cost like $3-4 maybe, and it's very high converted mana cost, 8 in a red, but the spell costs 1 less to cast for each creature on the battlefield. Deals 13 damage to each creature. So if there's 8 creatures on the board, it costs 1 red. Destroy basically every creature because not many of them have more than 13 toughness. Again, a little expensive, more expensive relatively to other cards on the list, but I think it's good. Got Murder, super cheap removal, instant speed, 3 mana is pretty generic. I think it's good to run. Destroy target creature. Got Bone Shards, 1 black, additional cost to the spell, sacrifice a creature or discard a card. Typically you probably want to sacrifice a creature to get that engine going kind of too, because we have a lot of sacrificing outlets. Or you could discard Anger or something else to the graveyard to get the benefit. But destroy target creature or planeswalker. Or planeswalker is important because we don't have too much planeswalker removal, but we do have a lot of creatures and burn damage, so that's, I guess we just don't have targeted planeswalker removal. Terminate, destroy target creature, can't be regenerated. Super good instant speed spell. So this kind of rounds out our destroy stuff package. I think this is enough removal. If you feel like you need more, you could probably add some more. There's definitely better removal cards, but this is, for removal, red and black is like some of the best removal in the game. So even though this is technically not the best of red and black removal spells, these are so good still relatively to other types of removal from other colors. Next up, I guess we got some more spice and just supporting cards. I don't really know exactly what to call this. However, I guess we'll just say supporting stuff. So we got Court of Ambition. When it enters the battlefield, you become the monarch, but more importantly, at the beginning of your upkeep, each opponent loses 3 life unless they discard a card. If you're the monarch instead, each opponent loses 6 life unless they discard 2 cards. So as long as you're the monarch, even if you're not, they're losing 3 life and discarding a card, or discarding a card. But if you're the monarch, they're losing 6. So if somehow this makes it back to your turn, lose 6 life for 4 mana and discard 2 cards. And again, even if they're not, this is every single upkeep, keeps repeating. So every turn, you're getting, you're lightning bolting them to the face, or they're discarding a card, and you're proccing your boy to summon you big creatures. So spicy, so good. Deck is so exciting. Warstorm Surge, kind of expensive, 6 mana, but whenever a creature enters the battlefield under your control, it deals damage equal to its power to target player or creature. So even if you're summoning a 1 mana card, deal 1 damage to something. Summoning, I keep using the example of Ulamog just because he's right here, but summoning this, 10 damage to something, just because you summoned it. Really good. Kind of only, I think, better later in the game maybe. You get high mana cost, but man, you can win the game off that. You don't even need to like go to combat. Got some planeswalkers here. We've got Chandra, Pyromaster. Main one being the +1, deals 1 damage to target player and 1 damage to 1 target creature that player controls. That creature can't block. Just again, pinging to proc some stuff. You get exile top card of the library. You may play it this turn. Just again, another way to draw some cards. The ultimate, if you somehow get there, is exile top 10 cards of your library. Choose an instant or sorcery, exile this way, and copy it 3 times. And you copy it without paying its mana cost. Not super valid, but with 10 cards, you usually should hit at least 1 of your instant and sorceries, even though we're not running that many. We got Sebalt, another really cheap planeswalker, 3 mana. It's a 5/5. They can't gain life. Your opponents can't gain life. However, you're -2, you create a 1/1 devil. And if it dies, you would deal 1 damage to any target. So just again, great way to get some cheeky damage in. Rakdos Return, keeping the Rakdos vibes alive. For X in the Rakdos colors, deals X damage to target opponent. That player discards X cards. Pretty self-explanatory, pretty beautiful card. Next up is Sin Possession. I had the wrong card in here, so if you saw a card before, take that out, but 1 black. Enchant creature. Whenever enchanted creature attacks or blocks, its controller loses 2 life. Just a really cheap way if your opponent wants to block something you have, just to make them lose 2 life. So I think it's pretty spicy. 1 mana. Definitely probably better cards out there, but still pretty good. Bantu's Monument. This thing's maybe like $4. I'm looking at it now. Yeah, it's like $5 actually. A little expensive, but oh man, it's so good. For 3 mana. Black creature spells you cast cost 1 less to cast. Cool. Whenever you cast a creature spell, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. So I mean, this is, not that you need this for the deck, but it would just help so much because you have a lot of black creatures. They do cost a little bit, but the main thing here is every time you cast a creature spell, which is I think we're running 35 something creatures, maybe 36. Each opponent's gonna lose 1 life, you're gonna gain a life, so pings a lot of stuff. Next up, Wheel of Misfortune. This is another Rakdos card of just absolute anarchy. Each player secretly chooses a number 0 or greater, then all players reveal those numbers simultaneously and determine the highest and lowest numbers revealed this way. Wheel of Misfortune deals damage equal to the highest number to each player who chose that number. Each player who didn't choose the lowest number discards their hand, then draws 7 cards. So kind of just a super spicy way just to interact with your opponents. Be like, all right, let's all randomly pick a number, and either you're going to get dealt a lot of damage or you're going to draw some cards or discard your hand. Again, just causes mayhem and anarchy. That's what we're all about. Love cards like that. Rakdos Charm, just a kind of more versatile card. You can choose 1, exile all cards target player's library, store an artifact, or each creature deals 1 damage to its controller. All of these are going to be pretty valid, especially in Commander. Pretty cheap card, highly recommend running that. Led up to Stage, Spectacle 1, so we're always going to have a Spectacle. Usually for 1 mana, we're going to exile type 2 cards of the library, and we can play them until the end of the turn, or end of the next turn. Just a great way to see more cards. Even though it's not technically drawing them, you're kind of drawing them. Village Rites, 1 mana, instant speed. We can sacrifice a creature and draw 2 cards. Again, we wanted to sacrifice some stuff. We got some cheap creatures, they do some stuff too when they go to the graveyard. We got Chaos Warp, 3 mana, instant speed. The owner of target permanent shuffles into his or her library, then reveals the top card of the library. If it's a permanent, they put it on the battlefield. Kind of just a good way to remove something from your opponent, but also if you want to, play the fun game and be like, okay, I got this dumb permanent on the field, or this weak permanent. Let's put it in my library and try to get something better. Also can save your other creatures though. If someone targets your creature, you can instant speed target that and then get it back to the deck, kind of saving it if you don't want it to go to the graveyard. Gotta Read the Bones, another way to draw some cards for 3 mana. Scry 2, draw 2, and you lose 2 life. Just a good way to get some cards in your hand and get the card you want. Got Grave Upheaval. Put target creature card from a graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. It gains haste. Oh, any creature from any graveyard. But if you don't need it in your hand and it's early game, you can basic land cycle, 2 mana, discard this card and get a basic land, put it in your hand. Good all stages of the game. Let's move on to some artifacts just to help with mana filtering and stuff. Prismatic Lens, 2 mana, add 1 mana of any color for 1. So again, mana filtering, Arcane Signet, you kind of want this in like every single commander deck. Add 1 mana of any color to your commander's identity. Then we just got some Rakdos Signets, again, just getting some mana filtering. Got the rune. Just some more cheap ways of filtering our Rakdos mana. This we can also sacrifice and allow us to draw 2 cards. Then we got this, again, just some more ways to filter our mana. Not too much to talk about there. Let's go for the lands. We got Bajuka Bog, just we can exile target player's graveyard. Command Tower, gonna kind of want this in every single commander deck. Then we got some dual lands for the Rakdos colors, like the Guildgate. We got the Caves, you can gain 1 life. Evolving Wild, just to search us for a basic land. Got Lava Claw Reaches, just some not elemental, but that is the creature, but just some creature land, just in case, our board gets wiped and we need to do a little bit more damage. Got this one too. Again, just more dual lands. Anything with Rakdos colors and it's cheap, you can pretty much run in here. That's a land. I think I forgot how to pronounce this, but the Ruins, you can sacrifice to deal 2 damage to each opponent. It comes in handy. Pretty good card in case it comes up. You got this card, each player discards a card, plays the ability only time you cast a sorcery. Just a fun way, again, if you have nothing really to do, you can just tap it or do this for 3. and make everyone discard. Got kind of Evolving Wilds just for Rakdos colors, Rocky Tar Pit. We got Snowbound Ridge, again, just more mana filtering. Got Leechard Swamp, a little expensive here. This might be $2, but check this out. For 1 black, you tap it, each opponent loses 1 life. Activate this ability only time you control 2 or more black permanents. But that does come up, especially you need to like ping your opponent to either summon Lord of Riots or just whatever reason that comes up. So then we got Sun Scorched Desert. Enters battlefield, does 1 damage to target player. Again, easy way to ping your opponent. And the last card, Temple of Malice. This might be like $1 or $2, but it enters the battlefield, you scry 1. If you wait maybe a few months, this card might go down, because right now, like the Rakdos mid-range and the like competitive scene is super good. I think they're running some of these cards, but yeah, great card in general though, because that scry 1 just on the land is pretty important. So I just forgot these swamps and mountains. We're going to be running 10 swamps and 11 mountains. This is going to bring us to 35 lands. I think that's fine for the deck, because we also do have a lot of mana filtering as well as cards that can draw. Let's talk about some quick upgrades and then I'll send you on your way, but just keep in mind that this deck is so upgradable. Anything with a high converted mana cost, like you can just play. Obviously things like the Eldrazi's, the Ulamogs, the Ceaseless Hunger 2, things like that, easily throw in the deck. Got things like Master of Cruelties. This is just a spicy Rakdos card. I usually have this in here because it's super fun. I think it's like $5 though. It's got First Strike, Death Touch, but whenever it deals combat damage to a player, their life total becomes 1. It just makes it so spicy. And so if their life total becomes 1, you just ping it with something else. Absolutely crazy. Got things like Rune Scarred Demon. This card's like $6 maybe, but enters the battlefield, search the library for a card. It's a big boy creature. You can get them out. Archaeana Cruelty. These are kind of bigger upgrades, kind of expensive per se, but depends on your budget too. But if you pull the card, it'd be great. This card is amazing. This card, it was in the deck, but this card went up to like $7 or something like that. Mayhem Devil. Whenever a player sacrifices a permanent, it deals 1 damage to any target. Really good, 3-mana, 3/3, good ability. So good card. I'd wait for it to come down probably in price. Rakdos Showstopper. This was also in the deck, but again, a little expensive, maybe like $5. 6/6 Flying Trample. It's got a fun flip a coin effect, and you can destroy creatures if they're not like a Devil, Imp, or Demon. Dreadbore. This was also in the deck. It's like $7 now again because the competitive scene, so wait for it to come down in price. Destroy target creature, Planeswalker. Super good. Got the Talisman too. This is just another thing, but this is expensive. You can always upgrade the lands, like get these cheaper dual lands, even like a Field of Ruin. This card too, Scavenger Runes that help graveyards or destroy graveyards. If you want to go super upgrade, you get these dual lands, even like Blood Crypt. This one's probably a lot more valid in this deck because, or just for Commander. Maybe it's like $7-8. Just some other dual lands I would highly consider to help filter mana. Got Leyline Tyrant, it's a flying 4/4. It's got a cool ability. When it dies, you can deal damage to stuff too. Pyrohemia, this was also in the deck. A little expensive though, I think like $8-9. At the end of the turn, if no creatures are in play, sacrifice it, but you can pay 1 red as many times as you can, deal 1 damage to each creature or each player. Pact of Negation, just some more removal if you want. Next card is Last Man Standing. Really wanted to add this card, but it's like $4 or $5, so a little expensive. But choose a creature at random and destroy the rest. So roll a dice. Oh, there's that creature, and then the rest are destroyed. I don't know. It's so spicy. And I got this Primordial card. Whenever it enters the battlefield, for each opponent, you may put up to 1 target creature card from that player's graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. Oh, that is so spicy. I tried adding this again, but I think it's like $4, $5. So just trying to keep the cost below, like definitely below 100, but probably more like below like 75. Really would like these decks below 50, but there's just so many cards and so many good things that it's very hard to do so. Again, there's so many cards you can add to this deck. Anything that's got like a creature with a high mana cost, you could just put in this deck. I mean, obviously it needs to have the Rakdos colors, but if it's just like an Eldrazi or something, you could just put it in the deck if you have it. Super upgradable, super customizable. I always have Wormcoil Engine again in mind because I love that card. Anyway, let me know some cards that you probably have in your Rakdos deck down below or some upgrades that you might consider throwing in. Thanks for watching, everybody. Hope you enjoyed. I'll see you later.